Hi everyone, it's Katrina. What if the secrets to our future are hidden in the past? From lost mysterious figures carved in stone to entire continents lost beneath the waves, today's all about lost civilizations and ancient knowledge. So grab your Indiana Jones hat because we are on a quest to discover the truths of history as we know it. Karahan Tepe. What if the secrets of the universe are buried deep within the ancient ruins of Turkey? Karahan Tepe is an ancient site in southeastern Turkey that is stirring up a lot of excitement, not just because of its age, which is hard to believe, but because some say it could be the work of an advanced civilization, or even aliens. But why? Listen to this and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Karahan Tepe is part of the larger Göbekli Tepe complex, which I know you've heard me mention before. But just in case, this site dates back to around 11,500 to 12,500 years old. That's about 7,000 years older than the pyramids in Egypt, which are already old. But what's really got people's attention are the discoveries made during recent excavations. Archaeologists have uncovered massive stone pillars and statues, intricately carved with images of animals, human-like figures, and abstract symbols. Some figures represent ancient gods with hands that have 8 fingers. Karahan Tepe is home to the world's oldest human statue that dates back to 11,400 years ago. These aren't your average carvings either. They show a level of skill and precision that doesn't fit the idea of what ancient hunter-gatherer societies were supposed to be capable of. There are advanced stone tools, including axes, knives, and arrowheads, indicating a high level of technological development. So who built these structures? And what made ancient people suddenly decide to stop wandering around and settle down in this place? According to ancient alien theorists, these figures and underground structures represent an advanced civilization that existed thousands of years ago and might be the oldest known civilization in history. Some researchers believe they belonged to an advanced civilization that knew way more than we thought was possible at the time. Could they have been ancient engineers, mathematicians, or maybe even teachers who passed down their knowledge to early humans? Possibly. And then there's the more out-of-this-world theory popular on ancient aliens. What if these builders weren't from Earth at all? The strange carvings and advanced construction techniques have led some to speculate that Karahan Tepe may have been influenced by extraterrestrial beings. Why? Because those carved statues they found within the site have big heads and unusually large eyes. They look suspiciously like depictions of ancient gods, or perhaps visitors from another planet. But before jumping to conclusions about aliens, it's also possible that Karahan Tepe was a major religious or ceremonial center. Maybe those carvings represent deities, mythological figures, or even cosmological beliefs that were central to the culture of the time. These people definitely understood symbolism and practiced some sort of religion. Whatever the case, it's clear that this site was important, and its builders were no ordinary people. The ongoing research at Karahan Tepe is crucial for piecing together the full story. Using advanced technology like ground-penetrating radar and 3D scanning, researchers from various fields are digging deeper into the mysteries of this ancient site. As new findings emerge, they could change everything we know about human history and the development of our society. The perfect number. Why does the number 3 appear so frequently in religious traditions around the world? The number 3 might just be the most powerful number in the world. It's often called the perfect number and shows up in religions and myths across the globe, all thanks to the idea of the Trinity. Most people think of the Trinity as a purely Christian concept, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But did you know that similar ideas appear in many other religious traditions? This mysterious trio pops up everywhere, from ancient philosophies to Eastern teachings. The Christian concept of the Trinity was officially defined at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. It is a cornerstone of the faith. But where did this idea come from? Some scholars, like Elaine Pagels, believe that early Christians borrowed the idea from Jewish traditions, which described a genderless God that later became more masculine in Christian theology. Over time, this 3-in-1 idea has sparked a lot of debate and confusion within the church. You may be wondering, why 3? Why not 1 or even 2? The mystery of the Trinity has led to countless interpretations and arguments throughout history. Eastern religions also have their versions of the sacred three. In Buddhism, for example, the three bodies of Buddhahood represent the body, speech, and the mind. These can be loosely compared to the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit in Christianity. Ancient Kabbalah, the mystical branch of Judaism, speaks of three original emanations from the divine source: nothingness, wisdom, and understanding. These three aspects form the foundation of all existence, much like the Christian Trinity is believed to encompass the entire nature of God. But maybe the Trinity isn't really about three separate beings at all. Perhaps it's a symbol for the process of creation itself, a process that unites all of existence. In this sense, the Trinity isn't about distinct personas, but about the act of creating, something that resonates with many religious traditions around the world. And maybe that's why the number 3 keeps showing up. It's a symbol of balance, unity, and the mysterious process of bringing something new into the world. Now let's take a quick break so I can say a big shout out to David Fowler and Matthew Boylan for supporting this channel. They're some longtime subscribers. I see you guys. Really appreciate the positive feedback. If you are new, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. A time before the moon. Imagine a world where the night sky had no moon, a time when humans gazed up at the stars without the familiar glowing ball looking down at us. It sounds like science fiction, but according to ancient writings and traditions, there really was a time when the moon didn't exist, or at least people couldn't ever see it. Some cultures have left records of living during this pre-lunar era. Greek philosophers like Democritus and Anaxagoras mentioned a period when the moon was absent from the night sky. Aristotle, the famous Greek philosopher, wrote about the Pelasgians, ancient people who lived in the region of Arcadia, a part of Greece. But according to Aristotle, the Pelasgians lived during a time when the moon was missing in action. These Arcadians were so ancient that they earned the nickname Proselenes, meaning those that were before the moon. Even Apollonius from Rhodes talked about a time when not all celestial objects existed. This was way before the global catastrophic floods mentioned in ancient myths, when the moon hadn't come out yet. Plutarch, another heavyweight in ancient literature, referred to the Arcadians as the pre-lunar people in his work Morals, and Ovid, the Roman poet, echoed this idea, saying that the Arcadians were around before the birth of Zeus. He said they were older than the moon itself. It seems like these ancient writers were onto something, or at least they believed they were. But wait, it wasn't just the Greeks. In Bolivia, the ruins of Calasasaya display symbols that suggest the moon entered Earth's orbit at a specific point in time. This would have been long after the first humans had settled there. The calendar gate at the same site even hints that Earth once had a smaller satellite object before the moon showed up. So is it possible that these ancient civilizations recorded a time before the moon existed? Even the tribes of Colombia and Africa have their own moonless legends. The Chibchas from the Bogota highlands spoke of an era when the moon was not yet in the heavens. In Africa, the Zulu people have a legend about two alien brothers, Wawane and Mpanku, who supposedly brought the moon into Earth's orbit hundreds of generations ago. The question remains, how did the moon get here? Were we around when it suddenly appeared? These questions remain unanswered, but the legend suggests that the story of the moon might be more complex than we ever imagined. The lost continent of Lemuria. The continents that we live on have been moving and changing since the beginning of time, and some may have even gotten lost beneath the waves, an entire landmass gone. There is a mythical lost continent called Lemuria that might sound like something straight out of a fantasy novel, but in the 19th century, it was a serious scientific theory. The idea began with a British zoologist named Philip Sclater, who in 1864 noticed something odd about lemurs. You know, the cute little animals from Madagascar. Madagascar has a bunch of these small, unique primates, while the African and Indian continents don't have any. This was way before plate tectonics and continental drift were even a thing. So Sclater came up with a wild idea. What if there was once a giant land bridge connecting these places? He named this hypothetical continent Lemuria, after the lemurs that inspired his theory. Back in the Victorian days, scientists were on a quest to explain the mysteries of the natural world. Sclater's idea of Lemuria, a vanished continent, was a popular theory to account for the similarities between plants and animals found on different continents. Soon, people were talking about Lemuria as if it were a real place. But here's the twist. Lemuria wasn't just a boring scientific idea. It quickly became a wild story that fascinated everyone, from mystics to people with big political ideas. Then came along Ernst Haeckel, a German biologist who was all about Darwin's theory of evolution. Haeckel took Sclater's Lemuria and ran with it, claiming that it was the birthplace of humanity. According to him, the first humans evolved on this lost continent and then spread across the globe. It sounds possible, right? Darwin, however, wasn't buying it. He even joked that geologists who believed in sunken continents deserve a special place in a lower region. I think he was talking about hell. But Lemuria didn't stop at just being a scientific curiosity. It got a mystical makeover thanks to Helena Blavatsky, a 19th century Russian occultist. In her book, The Secret Doctrine, Blavatsky claimed that Lemuria was home to an ancient race of giants. According to her, these giants had some seriously strange habits, like being hermaphrodites and laying eggs. And of course, dinosaurs lived there too, because why not? In colonial India, British ethnologists began linking Lemuria to the Dravidian people of southern India. Tamils, in particular, embraced the idea, weaving it into their own legends of a lost civilization called Kumari Kandam. These days, some still talk about Lemuria as a Wakanda-like utopia that sank beneath the waves. And hey, maybe they're onto something. In 2013, geologists discovered fragments of zircon and granite in the Indian Ocean. Incredibly, this find seems to support the existence of a lost continent. The evidence suggests that the continent disappeared sometime around 84 million years ago, which surprisingly fits right into some aspects of the original Lemuria concept, like the ancient land bridge between India and Africa. While most mainstream scientists will dismiss the idea of this alleged lost continent, it's hard to deny that there might be some truth to the theory. What do you think? Acoustic Wizards. Ancient civilizations were truly advanced sound engineers, and it seems like we are just now catching up thousands of years later. Evidence of this suggests that ancient people might have had a pretty deep understanding of sound and vibration. They knew that certain sounds and frequencies had physical effects. Sound influences mood and emotion, and can even produce physical effects. High-pitched or jarring sounds can trigger the body's stress response, leading to increased heart rate, blood pressure, and cortisol levels. Low-frequency sounds induce a sense of calm and tranquility. Ancient people used sound as a tool for building, healing, and spiritual practices. Let's begin with a visit to the iconic Great Pyramid of Giza. This ancient monument might hold some surprising acoustic secrets. Inside, the chambers and shafts seem to amplify sound. But was this just a coincidence, or did the builders know exactly what they were doing? Now let's look at Stonehenge in England. We all know this place is pretty special. This isn't just a bunch of stones plopped in a field. Those massive rocks seem to be arranged to create specific acoustic effects. The Gigantia temples on the island of Gozo in Malta were also likely built with acoustics in mind. The layout and orientation of the chambers might have been intentional to create specific sound effects or resonances to create an impact during religious rituals. Ancient myths and legends give us some hints. For example, in Hindu mythology, the god Shiva is said to play a drum so powerful that it could destroy the universe. Stories like these point to the idea that ancient cultures saw sound as something with real, tangible power. Dr. Hans Jenny found that certain sound frequencies can cause matter to form geometric shapes. Imagine what ancient people could have done with that kind of knowledge. They might have used sound to create intricate patterns in their art, architecture, and more. And here's where things get even more interesting: acoustic levitation. This is when sound waves are used to lift objects into the air without touching them. Modern scientists can do this with small objects like droplets of water. This is a new idea that some people have been adapting to builders of the ancient world. What if ancient builders used sound to move massive stones? It would take a ton of energy, and lifting something as heavy as a stone isn't exactly easy, but maybe they figured out a way to do it. Just letting you know, though, there is no concrete scientific evidence to support the theory of sound levitation in the ancient world. While ancient cultures may have believed in the power of sound, there is no evidence to suggest they had the ability to levitate objects using it. However, the evidence suggests they knew way more about sound than we might think. Sound might have been the key to some of their most incredible achievements. Pyramid science. What if the ancient pyramids were more than just monuments? In 2003, at the Temple of Quetzalcoatl in Teotihuacan, Mexico, archaeologist Sergio Gomez walked by a massive pyramid and he noticed a crack in the ground. This seemingly simple discovery kicked off an excavation that would uncover one of the most intriguing mysteries of ancient engineering. Teotihuacan was once a thriving metropolis. Now it's an archaeological park, and every inch of it could hold clues to its ancient past. When Gomez spotted the crack, he knew something big had to be underneath. And boy, was he right! After getting the green light to investigate, he and his team uncovered a perfectly crafted shaft that led 40 feet down into a cavern. But what was this cavern hiding? The team cleared out over 400 tons of debris and found themselves in a massive tunnel system, more than 330 feet long. And guess what? It ran directly under the pyramid. It wasn't just some ordinary tunnel. It was like stepping into the heart of an ancient machine. The walls were lined with pyrite, also known as fool's gold, which gave off a mysterious glow in the dark. But what was really incredible was that the tunnel seemed to be part of a complex system designed to generate energy. Yes, energy. Turns out the crazy ancient alien or conspiracy theorist claiming that pyramids were energy generators may have been right all along. So, what did they find inside this ancient generator? The team discovered over 50,000 artifacts, including hundreds of golden spheres made from pyrite and other minerals. These artifacts, combined with chemical residues and mineral deposits found in the tunnel, suggest that the ancient builders had knowledge of some kind of energy production. But how did they do it? Scientists have speculated that the combination of water, minerals, and possibly even electromagnetic fields in the tunnel could have created some form of energy. Evidence indicates this was some sort of rudimentary power plant hidden beneath a pyramid. But here's the catch. We still don't know exactly how this energy was used or where it was delivered. Could it have powered some lights? Maybe the entire city? Was it used for religious ceremonies? The answers remain buried in the past. But hold on to your hats, because the discovery didn't just stop at Teotihuacan. Other pyramid sites in Central and South America show similar signs of advanced engineering. Scientist John Burke found that many ancient sites were built on natural telluric energy fields, which pulse through the earth. At one pyramid in Tikal, Guatemala, Burke detected an impressive 908 volts of static electricity. But how did these ancient people know where to build these structures without modern technology? They must have known something we don't. It turns out many ancient pyramids were designed to harness and amplify these natural energy fields. They used materials like quartz and granite, which are great conductors of electricity, to enhance the energy flow. And in some cases, like at the Pyramid of the Serpent, water was channeled through the tunnels to create a kind of electric discharge. How amazing is that? Hundreds of years ago, the ancient people of Mexico were creating clean power using their pyramids. But the question still remains, what on earth were they powering? Any guesses? Let me know in the comments. Island math. Did you know that there are 3 kinds of people in the world? People who can count and people who can't. Just a little math joke to set the mood. You might not expect a tiny remote island with just 2,000 inhabitants to be the birthplace of a groundbreaking mathematical system. But on the island of Mangareva, halfway between Easter Island and Tahiti, the ancient Magarevans were mathematical wizards. And guess what? They invented a binary number system centuries before Europeans even knew what was up. In 2013, researchers Andrea Bender and Sigurd Beller discovered something mind-blowing. The Mangarevans had a unique way of counting. They used a decimal system for numbers 1 to 10, but when they needed to count higher, they switched to a binary system, just like the one modern computers use. They had special words for 20, 40, and 80, making mental math a breeze. These ancient islanders were doing all of their calculations in their head with no writing system to fall back on, something that most people can't even do today. How did they develop this system? It turns out they were expert traders, swapping goods like turtles, octopuses, coconuts, and breadfruit with faraway islands like Hawaii and Tahiti. The binary system helped them keep track of their trading activities, making sure that no one got shortchanged. What's even more surprising is that this complex number system was lost to history by the mid-1400s. So, while Leibniz might get the spotlight, the Mangarevans were quietly using binary long before it was cool. The origin of the Atlantis legend. There have been a lot of discoveries recently, possibly related to the lost city of Atlantis. A mountain discovered beneath the waves might just be the actual place. Off the coast of the Canary Islands, Spanish researchers have uncovered a seamount that might hold the key to the legend of Atlantis. Could this really be the long-lost place that the gods sank as punishment? Maybe. The scientists were so inspired by this place, they named it Mount Los Atlantes. This underwater mountain once consisted of 3 active volcanoes. Over millions of years, these volcanoes erupted, creating islands that eventually sank back into the ocean. The seamount is massive, stretching about 31 miles across and plunging 1.4 miles deep below the surface. But here's the wild part. Some of these ancient islands still have their beaches and sand dunes intact. There are beaches underwater sitting just 200 feet below the surface, like some underwater vacation spot. So what's the deal with these islands, and how exactly did they end up underwater? It all started during the Eocene epoch, around 56 to 34 million years ago. The volcanoes of Mount Los Atlantes erupted, forming islands. But once the eruption stopped, the lava began to cool and solidify, becoming denser. This caused the islands to slowly sink back into the ocean. And as sea levels rose after the last ice age, they were lost beneath the waves once again. Plato's story of Atlantis describes a powerful civilization that sank into the ocean as punishment for becoming too arrogant and corrupt. Mount Los Atlantes hasn't shown any proof of being home to a real city because everything sunk, but it does show how islands can disappear beneath the sea, perhaps inspiring tales of lost lands like Atlantis. Now, the research team is analyzing samples from Mount Los Atlantes to figure out exactly when these islands started to sink. They are also planning to return to the area for further exploration. Who knows what other secrets are waiting to be uncovered in the depths? The Little People of Hawaii. Tales of little people have existed pretty much since the beginning of time, like elves, dwarves, goblins, and leprechauns. But there is one group of little people that you may have never heard of before. The Menehune of Hawaii. These mythical folk are said to be tiny, incredibly skilled artisans who would sneak out of the forest at night to build impressive stone structures, only to vanish before dawn. But who exactly were the Menehune? Were they real people or just the stuff of legends? Historically, Native Hawaiians believed the Menehune were a real small human clan. Some even claimed that a group of people on Kauai and another on the Big Island in the early 1800s were descendants of the Menehune. Notably, R.S. Kuykendall, a respected historian, also leaned toward the idea that the Menehune were actual humans. However, this view wasn't universally accepted. In 1951, the Bishop Museum published a bulletin that completely changed the Menehune. It suggested that these tiny people weren't humans at all, but mythical beings born from a mix of forgotten Hawaiian history and European reinterpretation. According to the bulletin, the Menehune were not mentioned in Hawaiian history until European contact, with the earliest written references appearing in the late 1800s. So, could it be that the tales of the Menehune were just creative stories cooked up by Europeans? It's a mystery, but one thing is clear. The Menehune were seen as something other than ordinary humans. They were more like magical forest guardians with a knack for building. Descriptions of the Menehune paint a picture of short, stout people who live deep in the forests, in caves, or in primitive huts made from leaves. Bananas were their favorite food, and they wore clothes made from banana leaves and fibers. This might sound like a tall tale, but the reality could be rooted in the lives of ancient Hawaiians. Some believe that the Menehune were an early group of settlers who lived more primitive lives than the Hawaiians who came later, possibly giving rise to the legends. The original Hawaiian accounts didn't describe them as magical beings with superhuman strength. It was only when the story was translated into English that the Menehune were turned into a supernatural race. So it seems like the myth of the Menehune was, at least in part, a case of lost in translation. The first native Hawaiian historians, like David Malo and Samuel Kamakau, gathered stories from the oldest members of their communities. They described ancient Hawaiian customs and lifestyles that share striking similarities with the tales of the Menehune. These ancient Hawaiians lived in the mountains, made clothing and shelter from banana plants, and were known for their impressive stonework, just like the Menehune. Maybe these early Hawaiians are the real-life inspiration behind the Menehune legends. Adding to the mystery, Captain Cook and other explorers noted that the Hawaiians they encountered were generally tall and well-formed, but they also observed groups of people who were shorter and had more primitive features in their eyes. Archaeological findings also suggest that some ancient Hawaiians were shorter, adding fuel to the fire of the Menehune. So what's the truth here? The Menehune could be a blend of real history and myth. They could be a representation of an ancient group of settlers whose way of life was preserved in stories and legends. Or they could be nothing more than a fairy tale. What do you believe? Let me know in the comments. New Siberian Culture. In 2018, something unexpected happened in Siberia. Construction workers were busy preparing land for a new cemetery when they accidentally stumbled upon something much older, a 2,000-year-old tomb. As they flattened what they thought was just a natural hill, they uncovered a piece of ancient history that might belong to a previously unknown culture. The hill was all that remained of the lost people. The discovery of this new tomb piqued the interest of Dr. Dmitry Vinogradov and his team from the Siberian Federal University, who began excavating the site in 2021. What they found was fascinating. A large rectangular pit lined with wood and covered in a birch bark carpet. The pit contained the remains of 50 people. Alongside these ancient individuals were their most prized possessions: bronze axes, daggers, knives, mirrors, needles, beads, and even ceramic containers for food. One of the bronze plaques featured a striking image of a stag, a symbol commonly seen in Siberian Scythian art. The Scythians were fascinating nomadic warrior people who roamed Central Asia from the 7th to 3rd centuries BC. They were known for their excellent horsemanship, toughness, endurance, and ability to disappear into the vast steppes whenever they wanted. The Scythians were legendary during their time, and their influence spread all the way from China to the Black Sea. Most of what we know about them comes from ancient Greek, Persian, and Assyrian writings. They both feared and admired the Scythians, who they called barbarians. Dr. Vinogradov and his team believe that this tomb was used by a family over many generations. They even suggest that it might be evidence of a new Scythian-type culture they are calling a Ticinian culture. But this name isn't entirely new. It was first coined by historian Mikhail Grizanov, who found similar sites in the area. So is this really a brand new culture, or just a variation of something we already know? Archaeologists have found thousands of burial mounds, or kurgans, left by the Scythians across the Eurasian steppes, and the new Siberian tomb shares many similarities with these. However, there is a catch. The bulldozing that revealed the tomb also destroyed some crucial evidence. This makes it harder to confirm whether this truly represents a new culture or not. Is this discovery the key to unlocking a new chapter in ancient history? It's still too early to say for sure, but one thing's for certain: Siberia holds many secrets, and this tomb is just one of them. How far back does archaeology go? Imagine Indiana Jones stumbling upon a hidden chamber filled with ancient artifacts. As he dusts off a tarnished statue, he utters his iconic phrase, "It belongs in a museum." But what if he had been transported back to the very birthplace of museums? What if Indiana Jones went back to ancient Mesopotamia? There, he would find that his passion for preserving history was shared by none other than a Babylonian princess named Enigaldi Nana, the daughter of King Nabonidus. She was a high priestess for the moon god Nana/Sin, and around 530 BC curated what is believed to be the world's first museum. Museums aren't just a modern-day invention. Even in ancient times, people wanted to showcase things older than themselves to share. Located in the ancient city of Enigaldi Nana's collection wasn't just a random assortment of old stuff. These were carefully selected artifacts from different eras, ranging from 2100 BC to 600 BC. The items included statues, a ceremonial mace head, and even a boundary stele, all neatly labeled and with descriptions in 3 languages, including Sumerian. But what motivated Enigaldi Nana to gather these relics? She was just as fascinated by their past as we are today. Her father, King Nabonidus, is even considered the world's first archaeologist because of his love for history. He conducted excavations, found lost texts, and some of the artifacts in Enigaldi Nana's museum were even discovered by him. It seems like archaeology and historical curiosity ran in the family. The labels on these ancient artifacts weren't just for show. These early examples of metadata provided essential information about each artifact, similar to what we see in museums today. The labels show that Enigaldi Nana likely used these items for educational purposes, and not just as a personal collection. Thanks to the writings of a previous priestess, Enigaldi Nana recreated rituals from 800 years earlier and brought back the teachings of a lost school for young priestesses. Not only was she preserving history, but she was also teaching it. During the Neo-Babylonian period, an interest in history was a big deal, especially among monarchs. King Nabonidus, for example, didn't just focus on archaeology. He also revived ancient religious traditions connected to the moon god Sin. When Enigaldi Nana was appointed by Nabonidus, the religious position that she represented and the rituals associated with the role had been forgotten. It was thanks to the documents she had found that once belonged to Nebuchadnezzar I that she was able to bring back a lot of ancient teachings. The king was continuing a tradition that had been dormant for over 1,000 years. He brought history back to life. Unfortunately, though, the city of and its museum didn't last forever. Around 500 BC, the city was abandoned, and who knows what priceless artifacts and ancient texts were lost in the process.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
Ancient Math Tablet. An ancient tablet was recently unveiled that shows the oldest evidence of geometry anywhere in the known world. The tablet comes from somewhere between 1900 and 1600 BC. It was made by a Babylonian surveyor, cut out of clay and written on with a stylus. The tablet wasn't actually discovered recently. It has been sitting for about 100 years in a museum in Istanbul, Turkey. But no one really knew what to make of it until scientists recently rediscovered it in the archives. They were shocked to find that the unnamed Babylonian mastered the Pythagorean theorem about 1,000 years before Pythagoras was even born. This is such an amazing discovery that it will literally rewrite the history books. That's because, just until recently, everyone believed that it was the Greek astronomers who invented trigonometry. But as it turns out, the Babylonians were way more advanced than anyone previously gave them credit for. It was these ancient people who mastered mathematics while the rest of the world was still living in caves and trying to figure out how to write down their thoughts. It was Daniel Mansfield and his colleague Norman Wildberger who decoded the ancient clay tablet, which is known as the Plimpton 322 artifact. It's 4,000 years old and covered in organized groups of numbers that mathematicians know as Pythagorean triples. It was an ancient tool that could solve very complicated geometric problems, and it may have even helped the Babylonians build some of their more impressive monuments and temples. Lebanon's Baalbek. Baalbek is arguably the greatest ancient city ever built. It's located in modern Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley and perched on the top of a mountain. It was a continuously used settlement for 10,000 years, with its origins going back to the very first major civilizations, built probably by the Sumerians. It was what some historians have called the epicenter of life and fertility in the ancient world. The name of the city is made from 2 words. The first, Baal, was the lord of the gods worshipped by the Sumerians and Babylonians. Baal was actually the precursor for gods you may know as Zeus and Jupiter. The second word is Nebek, which means sources. So this city was named the source of the god Baal, but the Romans called it by its Greek name, Heliopolis, which translates to the city of the sun. What's even more incredible is the fact that Baalbek is still occupied today. Its current population is about 80,000. This city has a history that goes all the way back to the beginning of modern man. It was occupied probably in the year 10,000 BC as a Neolithic settlement, and as the settlement grew and the people evolved, they continued to build until they had a city worthy of their gods. The most spectacular part of the ancient city was a temple dedicated to Baal at its center. The blocks used to build the temple weigh up to 10 times more than the individual blocks that comprise the Great Pyramid of Giza. These stones had to be lifted into place, and scientists still haven't figured out how the ancients did it. These stones were brought up a hill, which means they couldn't have used carts, pulleys, or levers. It's almost as if they built the temple by magic. How do you think ancient civilizations moved such heavy stones? Let me know your ideas in the comments. Handbags of the gods. The ancient Sumerians, Assyrians, and Babylonians may have been in contact with supernatural figures known as the Anunnaki. In fact, they may have gotten closer to the gods than any civilizations that came after them. Let's start with the Assyrians, who etched figures of gods into stone. These gods were often depicted as having wings and holding mysterious bags, almost like modern handbags. It looks as if they are carrying little pieces of luggage. The exact same gods have been found depicted in stone carvings all across ancient Mesopotamia, with the Babylonians and the Sumerians. Some believe these gods were in fact visitors from another planet, which is how these ancient civilizations managed to prosper in the way that they did. The handbags they all seem to be carrying could represent some kind of cosmic knowledge that they brought down from the heavens to share with the primitive people of Earth. There is another possible explanation. These items have also been referred to as the cone and bucket, and refer to the two items that are frequently held in the hands of winged genies depicted in the art of Mesopotamia. Many believe that they may have been used as part of a blessing ritual. The Anunnaki were worshipped as gods way before the Egyptians ever worshipped Osiris and before the Greeks celebrated Zeus. These were the first winged gods and may have been the inspiration for the Christian angels that came later. As of now, archaeologists don't know the whole story behind the Anunnaki. It's clear that the ancient Mesopotamian societies worshipped strange cosmic gods, but whether they really did come from outer space to share their knowledge is up for debate. Sumerian spaceships. According to the Iraqi transport minister, the Sumerians launched spaceships from what is today Iraq 7,000 years ago. This was a hugely controversial speech that was given just recently at the inauguration of a new airport in Dakar. He said that the very first airport was built by the ancient Sumerians and claimed that they launched spaceships from it to explore other planets. Could there be some truth to this? The transport minister referred to the work done by the Russian professor Samuel Kramer, an expert on ancient Sumer, who detailed how they had an extremely advanced understanding of the cosmos beyond many cultures that came after them. The Sumerians were recording astronomical happenings around 3,500 BC. This was way before any other ancient civilizations took notice or recorded this kind of knowledge. They also were the first society to equate the planets with gods. For example, their main god was Marduk, whom they associated with Jupiter. Marduk was also the patron deity of Babylon before it became Babylonia. Unfortunately, Minister Kadem Finjan can't really be taken at his word. He claimed that the Sumerians had built their airport for their space launches at the exact same site where the new airport was opening. Quite a coincidence. He also claimed that all the angels in the world are ancient Sumerians, which is an interesting take on things. Babylonian calendar. The Babylonian calendar was quite similar to our modern calendar. It consisted of 12 lunar months, with each new month beginning with a fresh crescent moon. Every month began when the crescent moon was seen low on the western horizon at sunset. But the Babylonians weren't the first ones to use this kind of calendar. They actually based it on the Sumerian Ummah calendar that was created in the 21st century BC. Here's a piece of history that might blow your mind. On the old Babylonian calendar, they had every seventh day reserved to be a holy day, though they called it an evil day because it was seen as unsuitable for certain activities. You were forbidden to make a wish on this day, because that used to be a thing, and then every 28th day was a rest day. This means that it was the Babylonians several thousand years ago who first thought up the idea behind Sunday as a day of rest and relaxation. The next time you are enjoying a lazy Sunday afternoon with no work, be sure to thank the Babylonians. You can even be like the Babylonians and present offerings to the different gods each Sunday of the month, like they used to. The difference between our modern calendars and Babylonians is that they didn't always have even weeks. They would have 3 7-day weeks, and if there were too many days at the end of the month, the final week could be as many as 8 or 9 days. Uruk. Uruk was one of the most critical cities in ancient Mesopotamia. It was founded by King Enmerkar probably around 4500 BC and located in Sumer, what is today modern Iraq. Uruk is famous for the great king Gilgamesh, who lusted after immortality. But this city is also famous because of how many firsts it had in the development of civilization. Uruk is considered the first real city ever built, even though it's not quite as old as Baalbek. It was the first city to develop a seal that could mark personal property and be used as a signature on documents. And it was the first city where a ziggurat, an ancient style of pyramid, was built. The first ziggurats came in the 3rd millennium BC, a stepped tower-like pyramid with a massive temple on the top for worshipping the gods. Many historians agree that it was the ziggurat in Uruk that probably inspired the Tower of Babel in the Bible. The city of Uruk was occupied for around 4,800 years. Nobody knows exactly why, but the great, arguably the greatest city of humankind at the time, was abandoned in the year 300 AD and forgotten until it was rediscovered in 1853 by archaeologists with the British Museum. The wheel. The ancient Sumerians were the ones who invented the wheel, but they didn't invent the wheel in the way that you're thinking. They didn't make the first wagon wheels for a chariot. Instead, they created the first ever pottery wheel, which did pave the way for wheels that would be used on vehicles. The concept of the wheel came about in 3500 BC for the very first time because the Sumerians were looking for a better way to create pottery. They came up with the potter's wheel, which at the time no other civilization had access to. It was a flat disc made of extremely hard clay that could be spun on an axis to allow a skilled professional to form jars and bowls from wet clay evenly. The wheel then evolved from this invention. They eventually realized that if they cut pieces of wood to resemble logs, which they knew could move heavy objects by rolling, and put something sturdy in the middle, they could move heavy things. Through a lot of trial and error, they eventually invented the very first axle out of wood. They then attached a sledge to their rolling wooden wheels to make the world's first cart. The first written language. The Sumerians didn't only invent the wheel, they also invented written language. At least they were one of the first cultures to figure out how to use a writing system. The cuneiform script was invented in Mesopotamia back in 3200 BC. And is the only system of writing in the world that can be traced back to its origin. The first forms of writing weren't for stories or newspapers, but for recording and counting goods for trade. Merchants needed a way to keep track of their shipments, so they evolved from recording goods using clay tokens to pictography, then eventually to a fully fledged alphabet. But the Sumerians weren't the only ones developing an alphabet. China was also hard at work creating their very own writing system. The issue is that archaeologists don't know when that writing system first began. They can pin down cuneiform script to the exact century, making it by default the oldest. Archaeologists can actually trace the evolution of this language through nearly 8,000 years of history. From between 8,000 to 3,500 BC, Sumerians used tokens instead of writing. From 3,500 to 3000 BC, they used phonetic signs. Then, from 3000 to 1500 BC, they used an alphabet of about 24 letters, with each letter representing a single sound. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon. If there were a single great creation by the Babylonians, it would be the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The gardens are considered to be one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, though no trace of them exists today. The Gardens of Babylon were built by King Nebuchadnezzar II, often considered to be the greatest king in Babylonian history. He ruled between 605 and 562 BC. But there is a lot of debate and controversy surrounding the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Some scholars don't believe they existed, while others don't even think they were built by the Babylonian Empire, but rather by the Assyrian Empire. The issue is that there is no archaeological proof of their existence, with experts having nothing to go on except for accounts written down by ancient historians. Another issue is that Babylon was controlled by both the Babylonians and the Assyrians, making a lot of the city's history a little confusing. But what exactly were the Hanging Gardens of Babylon? They were supposed to be the most splendid gardens anywhere in the world, almost like a temple pyramid, but bursting with garden life. There were stone terraces, huge trees, and flowers everywhere. It had a theater over 60 feet tall. Basically, it was the most impressive botanical garden ever made, if it was ever there at all. Ancient sailboats. In ancient Mesopotamia, a very smart person invented the sailboat. This was 5,000 years ago, and it was thanks to Mesopotamia's geography that the boat was invented. The ancient cultures who lived here, from the Sumerians to the Assyrians, were stuck between 2 very large rivers, the Euphrates and the Tigris. They needed a way to cross the water so that they could trade with each other. The first boats were simple and made out of wood. They could carry people downstream and then back up. But they needed boats that could actually navigate directly across the water. Inventors finally realized that they could use the wind to push what was essentially a large canoe. But they were still in the early development stages and didn't quite understand how to angle or direct the sails to capture the wind. Instead, they used a square of cloth, and the wind just kind of pushed them whichever way it wanted. These weren't the best sailboats, as they hardly had enough room for trade goods. Still, the early models of the sailboats helped the Mesopotamian civilization to turn into the mightiest empire on Earth, while their seafaring invention was eventually copied by every single society in the world. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite thing about the ancient Mesopotamians? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you soon! Bye!